And let's take you back now to Peggys Cove, Nova Scotia, where a ceremony is underway marking 25 years since the deadly Swissair crash.
This difficult milestone in the spirit of remembrance, recognition, and healing. Le 2 septembre 1998, à 22h31,
September 2nd, 1999, at 10:31, Swissair Flight 111 crashed in St. Margaret's Bay waters. 1,922 lives were lost. Several others were changed forever. The areas were devastated along with the communities, and those who helped and recomfort and understand this tragedy were changed forever. 25 years later, we gather here beside the water to mark a difficult moment in a spirit of collaboration, recognition, and healing.
I invite Raymond Sewell to come forward. Raymond is a member of the Pabineau First Nation and an associate professor at St. Mary's University in Halifax. He will begin our ceremony this morning with a traditional Indigenous performance. J'invite maintenant Raymond Sewell, membre de Première Nation Pabineau et professeur agrégé à l'Université de St. Mary's, pour débuter la cérémonie de ce matin.
Professor at St. Mary's to begin this morning's ceremonies with a traditional Indigenous ceremony.
It's an honor to be here today and to sing this song in the shores of Mi'kma'ki. Yeah, what else can I say? But it's an honor to be here. I'm going to sing a song of hope in the language, and I hope you feel the connection to the song. Walaliak gesok walaliak sit no gondo gijiksrao sudmaya ula gerebek yonk jijagamit. Abu Gwan winin iskaminu muktuada sualinin. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo. Abu Gwan winin dandeli el nu kolsun madie. Abu Gwan winin dandeli el nu gedebegi adie. Abu Gwan winin dandeli el nu kamal kaldudie. Abu Gwan winin iskaminu muktuada sualinin. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo. Abu Gwan winin dandeli el nukamal kaldudie. Abu Gwan winin dandeli el nuk gedebegi adie. Abu Gwan winin dandeli el nukamal kaldudie. Abu Gwan winin iskaminu muktuada sualinin. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo ya hiye. Yo ya hiye ya hiyo. Tahoe. Thank you.
Thank you again, Raymond, for being with us and for offering such a fitting tribute. Merci. Wilale.
Thank you.
Today's ceremony is one of a series of events this weekend, marking the 25th anniversary of the Swissair Flight 111 tragedy. La cérémonie d'aujourd'hui fut partie d'une série d'événements qui marquent cette fin
It's
de
our
semaine
part of
de
our series of
25e
events to
anniversaire
mark
de la
this
tragédie
weekend of the 25th
de
anniversary
Swissair.
of the Swissair Flight 111 disaster.
Those who were lost and those who were impacted with tributes of light. From the darkness, two spotlights rose to the sky from the memorial sites at Bayswater and Peggys Cove. Together, we drew strength from the united light we remembered and we reflected. This morning, we will again and always remember those who are lost and the loved ones they left behind. We will also recognize the tremendous response this tragedy inspired in the communities, organizations, and Nova Scotians who rushed to help over the hours, weeks, and months that followed. This afternoon, family members, members of the local community, and our official delegation will join together in a spirit of healing. Hier soir, nous nous sommes réunis pour rendre hommage aux
Last
disparus
night,
et aux personnes
we
touchées par cette
gathered
tragédie.
to honor those who disappeared or affected by this tragedy. Two lights raised to the sky at the commemorative sites of Bayswater and Peggys Cove. Together, we have taken the strength of the light for reflection. This morning, we'll remember again and always those who were lost.
We will
also recognize the extraordinary response that this tragedy raised among the communities, organizations, and Nova Scotians who rushed to help over the hours, weeks, and months that followed. This afternoon, members of the families and local communities and our delegation will gather in a spirit of healing. Remembrance, recognition, healing. These are the principles that guide us all this weekend.
Remembrance, recognition, healing. This is what guides us all this weekend. I now invite the Honourable Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, Minister of Veterans Affairs Canada and Associate Minister of National Defence, to deliver remarks on behalf of the Government of Canada. J'invite maintenant l'Honorable Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor.
I now invite the Honourable Petitpas-Taylor, Minister of Vets, to speak on behalf of the Government of Canada.
Thank you, Stephen. Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello,
Honorable
everyone.
Lieutenant-gouverneur, Monsieur Leblanc, Madame Leblanc,
The Honourable
Madame
Lieutenant
Léon
Governor Leblanc,
Monsieur Gatchi,
Ms. Leblanc,
Monsieur
Mr.
Chétérier,
Gatchi,
Monsieur
Mr. Chétérier,
Bingham-Perras,
Mr. Bingham-Perras, Minister Lore,
Savage, Rear
Air
Admiral
Savage,
Kurtz, Mr. Daly, honored guest, veterans, and dear friends. Peggys Cove, a small maritime fishing village nestled around this perfect little inlet, dotted by these perfect little homes. One of the most visited sites in Canada, people from all over the world come to see the majestic lighthouse on the point overlooking St. Margaret's Bay and the wave-washed boulders down below. On a clear day, you can watch the trawlers fade away against the infinite horizon of the bay as they disappear east into the heart of the North Atlantic. Mais ceux d'entre nous qui ont grandi au bord de l'océan savent que
Those
ces
of us who grew up
ne sont pas
seaside
toujours
know
calmes.
that these waters
Des
are not
habitants
always
de
calm.
Peggys Cove et des environs,
Residents of
probablement
Peggys
vécu
Cove and
toute
around
la mer déchaînée,
have probably
pouvaient
lived
vivre.
everything that the unreserved or the unchained
On the night of
sea
September
could do.
2nd, 1998, so many of you rushed into the darkness without even the slightest hesitation. You had either learned from the news, have been alerted, or had heard or had seen it yourself and wanted just to go out and to help. Swissair Flight 111 crashed not too far from here, and you were among those who became part of the recovery effort. Cela a pris forme d'un effort collectif qui a mis à l'épreuve la
This
détermination
was a
de nombreux
collective
civils
effort
militaires,
that showed the
membres de la
demonstration
GRC,
of
et d'autres
many
premiers
members of the military,
répondants, et
RCMP, and
organismes
other first
communautaires
responders,
venus of Philadelphia.
and community organizations that
Even
came to
after
offer help.
25 years, we certainly want the heartbroken families and friends to know that we still remember their loved ones, and we always, always will. And as we gather here this weekend to remember and to honor the 229 passengers and crew who died that night, we pay tribute to all of you, the brave people from the Canadian Armed Forces, the RCMP, the fire, police, and emergency services, and from the communities that were closest to the crash. Nous vous exprimons notre profonde gratitude pour
We
la
are
façon dont vous
expressing to
avez
you
réagi
our
à cette
profound
tragédie
gratitude
de
for the way
Swissair
you
et
reacted
pour
to
ce que
this
vous avez fait au
Swissair
cours des
tragedy,
semaines, des mois qui
and
ont
for all you
suivi
did
pour
in
soutenir
the weeks
les
and months that
efforts
followed to
d'évacuation.
support the
Au
efforts,
nom du
the
gouvernement
recovery
du Canada,
efforts.
on vous remercie.
On behalf of the Government of Canada, we thank you sincerely. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Merci. 229 souls aboard Swissair Flight 111 were lost. They came from every corner of the world. They were scientists, diplomats, students, and newlyweds. They were mothers, brothers, children, and friends. In all of the ways that they were perfectly ordinary, they were all perfectly extraordinary. And they were deeply loved. In her poem, Peggys Cove, Nova Scotia writer and poet Budge Wilson captures the unique relationship that developed between the grieving families they left behind and a community of people willing to do anything to help. 229 âmes ont été perdues.
229 souls were lost aboard Swissair 111.
Des quatre coins du monde.
They came from all over the world. All they did made them perfectly ordinary people, but it also made them perfectly extraordinary people. And they were deeply loved. In her poem, Peggys Cove, Nova Scotia writer and poet Budge Wilson illustrates the unique relationship that developed between the grieving families of those who lost and a community ready to do anything to help them. Claire Mortimer will read this poem today.
Swissair Flight 111 will now share this poem with us today.
Mess anything up. Peggys Cove. On Saturday and thereafter, the families travel by bus, by car, to Peggys Cove. Peggys Cove becomes, for a time, indeed for a long time, probably still even now, a kind of shrine for the mourners. The village is roped off from traffic, from the curious. For over a week, the families own the lighthouse, the enormous rocks. They cling to the people who live there, drink their tea, tell them their stories, weep at their kitchen tables. They sit or stand on the rocks, arms around one another, facing the horizon, their personal graveyard. Some flowers are thrown into the sea, or teddy bears given to children. On TV, we see a soldier, or maybe he's a bus driver. He has a uniform on. He is crouched behind a giant rock, crying. From the other shore, the Aspatagon shore, 5 miles away, we see the figures on the rocks through our binoculars. They look like tragic insects, black against the white granite, not moving. One day, the sea is too turbulent to let the families go close to the water. The RCMP will not permit it. but the firefighters form a human chain down to the water. From a barrier, a mourner hands a rose to an RCMP man and says a name. He passes the name and the flower to a fireman, and another and another. The last man tethered to a rope that can rescue him from a rogue wave repeats the name, pauses, and tosses the rose into the heaving sea. Another memento, another name is passed down the line and is joined to the waves. Again and again this happens. Only the Wilkins family, mourning Monty, age 19, changes the rhythm by standing on the rocks and singing, "It is well with my soul," an amazing grace. Nobody there will soon forget that day.
Thank you, Claire. Merci. Budge Wilson's work inspires us 25 years later. L'œuvre de Budge Wilson nous inspire
Budge
25
Wilson's
ans
work
plus tard.
inspires us 25 years later.
The roses at the memorial before you were laid last night in memory of the victims of the crash of Swissair Flight 111. In the coming minutes, family members will join our dignitaries in a tribute to this moment 25 years ago. As they pass a single rose, they will share with it not an individual name, but a message that applies to each and every person who was aboard that plane, forever in our hearts.
Over the coming minutes, the families will join our dignitaries to send a final symbolic homage. With a single rose, they'll send a message to each person aboard this plane, forever in our hearts. While the rose is laid, Sergeant Liam Murray of the Nova Scotia Highlanders Regiment will play Amazing Grace.
Sergeant Liam Murray from the Nova Scotia Highlanders Regiment will play Amazing Grace.
Forever in our hearts.
As we all take time to reflect, a CH-149 Cormorant helicopter from the Royal Canadian Air Force's 14-wing Greenwood will begin a flypast. Over Bayswater Memorial, Peggys Cove, the Peggys Cove Memorial, and at the crash site of Swissair Flight 111. Pendant que nous recueillons un hélicoptère CH-1549,
During this time, a cormorant of the 14th Squadron Greenwood from the RAC will fly over the commemorative sites of Bayswater, Peggys Cove, and the crash site of Swissair Flight 111.
I now invite Canadian Armed Forces Padre, Lieutenant Colonel John O'Donnell, to lead us in a moment of reflection. J'invite maintenant Lieutenant
Colonel John O'Donnell, Padre of the Armed Forces, to guide us in a moment of reflection.
Listening to Claire read from the book that Budge wrote, I'm transported back to those first few days on the rocks of Peggys Cove. Budge describes things more eloquently than I could, even though I was there. I was deployed initially with my unit to provide support to soldiers who were out here scouring the shores as part of the recovery operation. But a couple of days after the crash, about 1,000 family members came to Halifax. And so I was reassigned to be with them along with many others. We met first at the Lord Nelson Hotel, where the brutal reality of the crash became inescapable after hearing the briefings there. And then the following day, as Budge notes, firefighters and other first responders became an integral part of the process of accompanying family members in their grief. Local people here know all too well how dangerous the rocks at Peggys Cove can be, even when the seas are calm. So the challenge that day was first to figure out how to set things up in a way that would allow families to get as close as possible to the water without jeopardizing their safety. It was extremely painful to have to just sit back and observe what was going on 11 kilometers offshore. Thank you, Your Honor. Eventually, as Budge says, we worked out a system that would allow one family at a time to be accompanied by a chaplain or other helper down from the lighthouse area to the controlled space close to the water. And once there, flowers and other mementos would be passed to a firefighter who would walk down and throw them into the surf. The first time that happened, I remember being struck how carefully and tenderly the firefighter held the flowers that had been passed to him. He cradled them in his arms and he walked down to the water's edge. He paused in prayer for a moment, tossed the flowers into the waves, and then he removed his helmet and he put it on his chest. Nobody told him to do that. He just did it. Sometimes, as I said last night, the simplest gestures are often the most meaningful. So it was toward the end of that first day that I accompanied the Wilkins family down to the controlled space. And on the way down, they asked me to pray with them. Sure. On the way down, they asked me to pray with them. They didn't ask me what my faith background was. And in that context, it really didn't matter. On this day, the things that normally separate people no longer really mattered. And so I took out my prayer book and I read part of Psalm 77 from the Hebrew Scriptures. In the day of my distress, I sought the Lord. In the night, my hand stretched out without wearying, and my soul refused to be comforted. As Budge describes, it was then that someone in the family started to sing a hymn. And then when they'd finished that, they broke into Amazing Grace. And at a certain point, I remember being preoccupied that we were taking a long time down by the water. It was beautiful, but there were many families waiting to come down. And so when we got back up to the lighthouse area, I apologized to the next family. They were a Muslim family. And the father said to me, he said, "Padre, you know, you could have stayed down there forever as far as we were concerned." That was an incredible moment. So for me, this story is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. It's a reminder that at the end of the day, however much we may at times sink into despair and chaos, there is always hope. That the line between us and them, between strong and weak, between giver and receiver, is not an absolute line. At any point in our lives, each of us will be on either side of that equation. The giver, the receiver, the strong, the weak. But it's especially in times of despair and chaos that this truth is revealed. I'll end my reflection just by inviting you to join me in remembering the children, women, men of Swissair Flight 111, remembering as well the recovery workers, the investigators. I see Dr. Butt over there. I mean, incredible people involved in this. So the response to each of these phrases is, we will remember them. At the rising of the sun and at its going down, we will remember them. At the rustling of the wind in the trees and in the calm stillness of a summer night, we will remember them. In the blueness of the sky and at the water's edge, we will remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember them. And when we have joys to share, that we yearn to share with others, we will remember them.
Thank you. Merci. The tragedy of Flight 111 deeply affected the people of Nova Scotia and the lives of everyone involved in the collective response. Although it would be impossible to list everyone, we recognize all contributions, including the efforts of members of local communities, first responders, provincial and municipal organizations like the Halifax Regional Police Department, Halifax Fire Department, Halifax Search and Rescue, and St. John's Ambulance. Members of the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Canadian Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary, and Transport Canada, and many more. To those of you with us this morning, we say thank you. La tragédie du vol 111 a profondément marqué la population de Nouvelle-Écosse.
Flight 111 profoundly marked the people of Nova Scotia and the lives of everyone who participated in the collective effort. While we can't name everyone, we recognize the efforts deployed by members of local community organizations, the first responders, provincial and municipal organizations such as the Halifax Regional Police, the Halifax Fire Service, the Search and Rescue Department of Halifax, and St. John Ambulance. The military, the RCMP, the Canadian Coast Guard, and the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary, and Transport Canada, and many others. To those among you who are here with us today, we say thank you.
I now invite Rear Admiral José Kurtz, Commander of Maritime Forces Atlantic and Joint Task Forces Atlantic, to deliver remarks on behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces.
I now invite Rear Admiral José Kurtz, Commandant of the Atlantic Forces and Inter-Army Operational Forces Atlantic, to speak on behalf of the Canadian Armed Forces.
I was not serving in Halifax on the 2nd of September, 1998. I was assigned to the West Coast. I cannot speak from personal experience, but I remember that evening vividly as we watched on TV the news of the terrible crash in waters I had previously navigated so many times before. La perte du vol Swissair 111.
The loss of Swissair Flight 111 is one of the landmark moments engraved into time.
And recovery efforts. For our hopes in the immediate hours after the aircraft went down were on finding survivors. And then, as the unfathomable reality sunk in, our hearts went to the families, struck with the deepest of grief, and with the first responders who faced destruction and human loss in unimaginable ways. Les pertes et la destruction ont laissé une blessure permanente dans l'âme des familles,
left a permanent wound in the souls of the families, the loved ones, and the first responders.
Distinguished guests from far and near, I'm humbled to be here today as the representative of the Canadian Armed Forces. Je n'ai pas participé aux opérations de recherche.
I did not take part in the rescue operations, but I have the greatest respect for those who lived the tragedy very closely, too closely. I'm speaking to you.
On this solemn occasion, the 25th anniversary of the Swissair 111 disaster, we gather not only to remember the lives lost, but also to honor and recognize the unwavering spirit of cooperation and determination that emerged in response to this tragedy. Nous sommes ici pour reconnaître la collaboration et le sens
to recognize the collaboration and sense of unity among the people who were involved and those who committed themselves.
In the aftermath of the crash, Canada stood at the forefront of a massive and complex rescue operation. The Canadian Armed Forces played a pivotal role in the response. Mais les militaires n'étaient pas les seuls dans cette opération.
But the military were not alone in this operation.
Police, the Canadian Coast Guard, the United States Navy, Emergency Health Services, first responders, community organizations, and individuals. Tous ces gens ont joué un rôle
All these people played a key role
during a time of high emotional intensity and enormous operational adversity. Canada's contribution to the rescue efforts highlighted our nation's core values of compassion and solidarity. We embarked on a mission to locate the wreckage and recover remains, and in doing so, we offered closure some closure to grieving families. The sheer determination displayed by all involved showcased the resilience of the human spirit and our shared commitment to helping those in need. Face à un défi imposant, la réponse du Canada
Faced with an
témoigne de la
imposing
puissance du partenariat
challenge,
et nous rappelle l'importance
Canada
et la valeur
demonstrated the
du soutien
power
mutuel
of partnership
en temps
and
de crise.
reminded us of the importance and the value of mutual support in crisis. On this sad and somber anniversary, we are reminded that we can be hit by tragedy at any time.
Come to understand that in those moments, when our faith in life is tested, our strength lies in unity and cooperation. The bonds forged during Swissair 111 crisis continue today and remind us of our shared humanity and our capacity for hope in the face of despair. As we honor the lives lost, let us also remember the remarkable individuals, the determined teams, and the strong communities who came together on the water and ashore. Souvenons-nous certainement des
Let's
êtres qui ont
remember,
perdu la
certainly,
vie, mais reconnaissons aussi les
those who
efforts
lost
de
their
ceux qui
lives.
ont
But let's
travaillé
also
des
recognize the
heures,
efforts
des
of the
jours
rescue and
et des
recovery
semaines
who worked
dans des
hours,
conditions
days, and weeks
difficiles.
in the
Let
most
us
difficult
recognize the
conditions.
enduring legacy of compassion, determination, and collaboration that emerged from this tragedy. May we carry these values forward in all that we do, so that the memory of Swissair 111 is not only one of loss, but of our collective resolve in the face of great challenges. Que la compassion qui a jailli il y a 25 ans
May the compassion that arose 25 years ago be the proof of our strength and resilience as human
of our
beings.
capacity to heal and rebuild together.